everyone. Thank you, thank you. Okay, a very warm welcome to esteemed guests, industry partners and friends. Thank you for taking your time this afternoon to come and join us. It's a nice, cool today, nice, cool weather. It's certainly it all goes well for all of us. Now, we are privileged to have each of you here, and then today is a special event, right? We have organized, and then we are privileged to have, of course, esteemed expert speakers and panelists who have joined us. You have Dr. Keith Smith, who has hailed from London, and he's actually 8 hours behind us. So can you imagine? It's actually 6 a.m. in the morning for him. And of course, you have Dr. Keith Fourie. He's actually from Cape Town. He's 6 hours behind us, about 8:30 as well. Very early, and of course, we have esteemed participants and panelists. Ken So, and also, of course, none other than our local rock star, Anthony Lim, Anthony Darit, unfortunately, who is a speaker today, due to emergency, unable to join us, but he has specially organized a recorded video for us, but he basically will try to join during the panel session, Now, Mark, can you flash to the next slide? Okay, I wanted to kind of bring everyone to this particular topic, regarding this Cyber Fortify. Of course, without Anthony's so-called input and insight, I think, and also Dr. Matt Fourie, I think we couldn't have pull this together. Of course, the eventual input from the rest of the speakers was also helpful. So one of the things that we know, and also some of you may be well aware, based on Gartner forecast, today, why is cloud computing so popular, right? And this is because I think the pandemic, right, like it or not, like we all know, it's been a real catalyst in terms of making these things happen. The investment since last year, based on the research done, was the amount that's invested globally in public cloud services, which include government agencies and also for e-commerce and so forth, has amounted to 396 billion in the 2021. That's this year. By next year, you're going to be looking at about close to 22% growth, and which will grow to about 482 billion. So what does that mean? So cloud computing is the what they call the trend and the place to stay right now. And this is something good to know, but certainly also can be very scary for a lot of people. So Mark, can you flash to the next page? Now, we all know that social engineering has becoming more prevalent. Every individual, I'm sure, would experience a scam email or a scam SMS or a WhatsApp, whatnot, right? It's actually pervasive to everyone in the country. Anywhere is not safe at all. Now, but today's topic is primarily focusing on enterprise risk management. And this is where we're going to talk about. And this is where eventually my good friend, Anthony Lim, all right, he's going to be basically, talk about this topic, and of course, inviting the rest of speakers to share. So the top 3 priorities will be based on global organizations would be: 1, expand cloud services and optimize IT costs. 2nd is basically support and secure remote workforce. 3rd is basically ensure business and cyber risk resiliency. Having that in mind, this is where we need to focus in on this topic. And that is a result why enterprise risk management is again becoming more important. It's not new. It's been around for the last 20 years, but certainly it's becoming more and more important in view of this investment in a cloud computing by many global companies. Now, so in short, with the social engineering issues and with all this investment in cloud computing, so the issue again, like I said, is no longer just restricted to company itself. Every individual in the company has to be alert, has to be vigilant, and has to what they call play the cyber team sport. That's what they call it. Cyber team sport. Now, okay, without further delay, I would like to so-called pass on the stage back to Mark so he can do a proper introduction to the rest of speakers. All right, so I want to invite you all to relax, sit back, and enjoy the afternoon, the next 90 minutes to hear from our invited speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to share in your conference. This is certainly a good conference for people to attend. So I won't delay, we're pushed for time, so I'll move straight in. Thank you for the introduction. I'll move straight in and start to present the material. So the first question is where's the value? You talk to an executive, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Where's the value for me? And I'd like to address that up front. So I've recently been involved on behalf of ISO doing a survey around the state of enterprise risk management, and we looked at a number of surveys, and what comes out very clear is people are still struggling to manage risk, and that's not just cyber risk, that's risk in general. And the second thing is that the magnitude, frequency of events that organizations are seeing and the losses are increasing. And on the right hand side there you see some figures that I've pulled together from the World Economic Forum, and you can see there a typical cyber risk in Singapore's currently running around 9.3 million. So this is a significant problem. But the issue here is people tend to think of risk management as just being about threats. It's about realizing opportunity. So I want to stress the last point there, that if you can manage your risk through enterprise risk management and appropriate processes, you will be able to open up opportunities that others can't see, that others can't exploit. You will open up avenues of opportunity for yourself, and that's really important. That's what risk management is really designed to do. So why are we where we are? Why is risk management poor? Why are we struggling? Why are we losing money? So I'd like to draw your attention to the graph that's on the right of your screen. And we've seen a significant rise in complexity. We've seen a significant rise in what's known as industrial clock speed, things moving quicker. And we've seen a drop in the available resources that we can commit to solving problems. Those are the three line curves you see on the diagram. And what that's called is the divergence. So you see the complexity and risk and decision making has gone up, where our decision making thinking time has come down. That's an important underlying factor which covers all of risk management. Cyber's part of that, so part of the problem that we see. You might wonder why there's a small child on the screen, why that's part of my presentation. Indeed, being a small child, you might feel it's inappropriate, but let me tell you this, that child does not exist. That child has been created using artificial intelligence. And that underlines another problem we see in terms of sophistication. That image is very deceptive. You can look at that and say, yeah, I'm seeing a child, and that's been created by AI. They're the same AI tools that are actually prevalent now that are growing in use around on the internet, which will attack your cyber systems. And that draws me to the point I'm making there on the right-hand side of the screen, that when you're dealing with risk around cyber risk, you're not dealing with passive situations, you're not dealing with weather systems. What you're dealing with is an active combat situation, where the people who are trying to get your assets are actively reviewing your risk management strategies. And that's why I would suggest you need to be on top of the risk management game. And that's not just now, that's into the future. So if you think where we are now, we've got 5G services emerging and Internet of Things. And already we're seeing cybercrime move into attacking Internet of Things. We're looking at cloud data and warehousing. I thank you for those figures earlier on. It just shows how important this technology in the area is. And we've got artificial intelligence, which has given us opportunity. But as you can see from that image, it also represents a challenge to our networks and our systems. And where are we going for the future? Quantum computing. There's a whole range of things. We're not stopping, we're moving faster. Those graphs on the right-hand side there. We are moving faster. We are moving quicker, we're getting more complexity. And that's why we really need to take risk management seriously and really up our game. Let's lift the bar. So if you look at the current process, now, you may have a different model, but I can assure you, end to end, it's going to be much the same. You look at the context that your organization's operating in, internal context, external context. You're identifying risks in some ways, you're going to evaluate those, the impacts they have, and you're going to do something about them. And that's a continuous cycle. So you might have a slightly different diagram. The one I'm showing here is from the international standard, the ISO 31000. You'll also find that in the ISO 27000 series. That's essentially how we address risk management. But this is the area that I want to approach. If you look at the first part, establishing the context. If you can do well there, you'll do better at your identification. You'll do better in terms of your analysing risks, and you're in a much better position to treat those risks. And what we find is when we look at organisations and how they're managing risk, cyber and ordinary risk, the weakness seems to be in establishing context. People are not, they don't necessarily have the tools in place at this current time to establish the context internal to their own business and external. What is it they're working against? And that's really where this methodology I want to introduce you to strengthens the game. So here's our methodology, and I'd just like to talk you through some of the steps here. It starts with a scenario. So, well, what's a scenario? Well, start with your plan. What is it you intend to do? We tend to talk in terms of stories. You know, we're currently in this region. We have a vision to grow into that region. We have new products in the making. This is your story and this is your plan. It's the start of the scenario. And what this methodology does is it builds around that. It gives you a structure, a framework to build around. So you start to record that scenario. You start to look at the risks that you currently identify through what you plan to do. You want to build it up, make that scenario more rich so that it tells a complete story that you can communicate to others, because they might identify risks you're facing too from their areas of specialism. The next step in this process is to look at what might disrupt that current situation. And we call those disruptors. Sources of deep uncertainty. People talk about emerging risks now. The interest in emerging risks has grown enormously, and currently I sit on panels looking at developing standards for emerging risks. Those are generally rich in uncertainty. We don't know how they might impact. We don't know how when they occur. We just know that these areas might arise in some future. Cryptocurrencies, quantum computing, artificial intelligence. How will that affect society? All these things are what we would consider emerging risks. Then we'll move down into behaviours. So if you've got a scenario and you understand how things are going to disrupt that scenario, you can then start to approach, well, how will people behave as individuals, as social groups, as teams? How will they respond? And there's been much said about cyber risk and the role of social networking and social breakdown of systems, where people break into your system not by coming through the firewall, but by social engineering individuals that work for your organisation. So behaviours are really important. The next step in our process is to look at the dynamics, because things are not static, they change over time. Delays, things that you might think need to be put into place to protect your networks, well, they might be delayed. They might be delayed by technology. It might be that you have to have some software. So there's delays to consider. How will that affect your security? Feedback loops. So once you've moved further forward with your plan, that's going to change your disruptors. It's going to change your behaviours. So there's feedback loops, positive and negative, things that will reinforce and things that will draw down on your ability to protect your networks. You see around that process that we're always trying to collect data. Data is very important. If you look at the way risk management's working now, it's generally driven by data and analytics and sound analysis of problems. And one of the things you'll hear from Matt later, I'm sure, is actually how you might approach the problem solving and get down to what the root causes are. Because what we see is a lot of people treat symptoms, they don't necessarily treat root causes, and that's really important to do that. So you're collecting this data, and at each of those stages you see in this methodology, you have the opportunity to step back, monitor what you're doing, review, and then return to the process at an earlier stage or a later stage. This iterative process really fits into the way people approach risk management. It's always an iterative process, and we want to use that and not work against it. So this process, this methodology, this way of expanding what you do is far stronger in that it uses the way people work. And that's really important to do. Scenarios. There's been a great growth in the use of scenarios across the world. So I was working with Lloyd's, the insurers in London. I was a research and development manager with them. one of the areas we had to do was looking at emerging risk. And what I've highlighted on here, and you see there's links, so if you get access to the slides, you can look at these links. These are scenarios, the Shen attack and the bashing attack, which were developed through Syrian, of which Lloyd's participated. And you see one there, which is a cyber attack on ports. So this is a good example of cyber attacks on computer systems used to deliver transport around the world. And some of the software that they're using ports, of course, is bespoke. So if you could attack a piece of bespoke software, then it would rapidly propagate around the world. And this is why I say, looking at behaviors and how people work and how people share information. This is an important part of how behaviors, how they can spread attacks around the world. And on the other one then, the Bashir attack, this is a scenario about how malicious software can arise in the first place. The third document on there, the one with the red label there, as part of the insurance industry, we did some work with Cambridge and commissioned them to look at how people can develop scenarios for the insurance industry. Now, let me say up front, when you look at these documents, you step back. They are very comprehensive scenarios, and you wouldn't need to have such comprehensive scenarios in order to really move the needle on your own risk management. You can do that with far simpler scenarios, but these are top drawer scenarios and really give you an idea of how far you can go and how useful they can be in actually helping to manage risk management in your organization. So I want to finish my presentation now with a call to action. What is it we are suggesting you start to look at and make as part of your everyday operation in order to fortify your own security responses to cyber risks? My suggestion is this, really. First, start to think about how you might adopt scenarios. You can make them small. You can make them a project, make it related to an individual project. It might be a particular development that's going on in your organization. You may make maybe even just secure access to your systems and an area where you'd create some scenarios. When we talk about software, often we say about use cases. Well, that's absolutely appropriate for you to build your scenarios. Start to bring together use cases. How will people use our systems? And start to think about the disruptors in your industry. And I think you'll find that will be one of the most strategically important conversations you will hold in 2021-22. Whenever I've done these risk management sessions with organizations, I say whenever, quite often what we have at the end of it is people sit back and they will comment on how strategically important that discussion, that capture of that scenario, that understanding of the environment and context really was for their organization. With more ramifications than just information security, it makes them start to think about these opportunities that I opened my presentation talking about. Think about new technologies. Think about how your customers' expectations will change, because it's not all about technology. We are seeing a lot of social change going on. People's expectations, younger generations do not approach systems the way we do. Think about your open source products. And when you look at those scenarios that I shared earlier on, you'll see that open source is a source of security risk that you might need to look at. And think of new threat vectors, because we are dealing with an active combat situation. Once we put security in place, the people who are trying to circumvent that security will find other ways around it. And then look at the behaviors. Think about it as individuals. How will individuals react to your systems? How will they react to you? How will they react to what you're doing? How will they behave in groups? And this is internal to your organization as well as external. You need your people to be compliant and supportive of your strategies for managing risk. And then finally, how will society react? How will society change? Think of the impact that email has had on society. It's a good example of IT systems and security. And as I say, the final step in our process is to think about the dynamics and how they may change as we move forward. The thing about enterprise risk management is it's always in a state of change. Now, I think I'm coming up to about 16 minutes. I'm finishing a bit early, but I'd just like to invite you just to think about some of these things that we've shared for a couple of minutes. And I'd like to thank you for giving me a chance to present at this conference. Thank you.
I'm Anthony, and currently I am the Information Security Officer of Allianz Insurance Singapore, and I'm also the Volunteer Outreach Director for the ISC Squared Singapore chapter. So this afternoon, we'll focus and look into this question. Are we getting more secure? So before that, maybe just a quick one. Opinions and all of the slides and opinions expressed are solely on my own and does not express the views or opinion of my employer. Okay, so in many organizations, most of the time, security efforts are focused exclusively on deploying technologies and implementing best practices, or responding to a never-ending streams of alerts and issues like never-ending firefighting. This reactive approach really keep the security leadership, busy with the different activities, and most importantly, we're having a hard time giving a specific answer. Are we becoming more secure day by day? This approach often creates distrust between our business leaders in our specific respective security function. Security efforts are seen as expensive, doing more to slow rather than secure the business. Security perceived as a blocker rather than a partner, or rather than an enabler. Acknowledging the reality that security needs will always exceed security capacity, maximizing security resource allocations, and, optic-wise, demonstrating progress towards a more secure organization, we need a specific and working strategy to make it happen. This requires our function, our cyber information security function, to transition from being an operator to being security leaders. And how can we achieve that? Maybe may not be totally all, because not one silver bullet is applicable to all organizations, but at least we can look into a particular framework, a particular operating model that at least, if not most of these objectives are met. We can look into it in different ways, and we can tackle it in different strategy. Maybe one, we can change our focus from information security controls and our physical, security controls to focus on what is actually the actual risk for the business, right? In fact, risk is the basis for all of the security decision making in a way, right? And also that's one way for us to have a visibility on the target, on where we are at now and where we wanted to moving forward. Understanding accountability, responsibility, and ownership of the security risks is another fundamental question that we need to answer. And we know that security does not owned by the security function or cybersecurity function by itself. The security risk decision is something that the business owns. In providing security leadership, establishing priorities, expectations, and oversight of risks, and the necessary efforts to manage them is something that we can also looked at with this particular operating model. Okay, so what needs to be prioritized then? Right, so our priority is to identify risks, number one. Our priority is to recommend responses, then the appropriate responses to this risk. Our priority is to facilitate the appropriate trade-off decision related to this risk and provide, a clear visibility on the execution and performance management of these risks. Setting up a security operating model that enables this approach is something that we'll quickly look at this session. In this particular security operating model, it governs and oversees or enable us to see the entire organization in a clear picture of lens, where the business is not only a recipient of the security services, but also business plays a huge part in collaboration, implementation, and of course sustainability of the security efforts. This operating model should utilize a risk-based approach, to identify and prioritize the risk mitigation efforts for us to properly secure our company, for us to properly enable and align our function to support the company vision and mission. Right? The core of the security operating model should have, a collaborative continuous improvement process, which is designed to sustain the controls that in essence secure the company. So what is this operating model that we're picturing at, and how can we go into this level of understanding? The company security governance model, this framework or model that we're looking at this afternoon should ensure collaboration with the different functions of the business. Through this operating model, the security function then will be able to provide a clear vision of target security capabilities. What exactly do we need in terms of people resources? What exactly do we need in terms of process implementation? What exactly do we need in terms of the technology that will enable the business to move forward effectively and fast? Okay, so there are like a couple of points that we need to look at, and we'll need to dissect them one by one as we go through each of the slides moving forward. So one is, as part of the operating model that we're picturing at, is envisioning at, is having a global security governance. Security control framework should be established, and we should have like a risk-based process that aligns with the business processes that we have as well. We also need to look into the critical security functions that will, overall support our security efforts, initiatives, and security operation. And then we'll need to look into the metrics. I'll give you some sample metrics that maybe you can look at as a baseline on how you will have a clear understanding on where your company stands in terms of this suggested threshold and metrics. Okay, so let's look into each of these approach one by one. Number one is having a global security control framework. It's an overarching policy that is based on one industry accepted control framework that provides the structure and guidance to apply the necessary best practices that enables you to understand the gap. So there is an overarching policy that will then be supported by your standards, and then will be supported by your respective guidelines or practices that each of the functions should abide to conform with and to support your global information security policy. So this not just ensure the company's visibility, but also this control framework cascades throughout your company to ensure alignment across different breadth of assets and different operating entities or different operating functions. This global policy must be aligned with the local regulatory requirements, of course. It must be aligned with your business objectives. And ultimately, it should align according to your company risk appetite. Alignment and collaboration are the keys to provide continuous and efficient operations. And there are a couple of benefits on setting this overarching security control framework. And as you can see here, it's a combination of your regulatory requirements, your contractual requirements, and your internal business needs as well. So one benefit that we can look at here is you'll be able to quantify and codify the desired security behavior on the specific standard that you want to follow. It'll provide a way to consistently educate and communicate with your stakeholders in a language that everyone understands. So you're basically sitting in between, translating the technical language into the business language, and provide, universal communication tools to external customers as well, for them to have a clear understanding in terms of your compliance with regards to regulatory requirements, for example. So they have like an idea on when you are standing in terms of specific benchmark. Okay, let's look on the number two. The second part of that envisioned operating system that we were actually having in our mind is to have the business plan's objective, right? So the business plan's objective is to allocate security resources appropriately and based on the risks to the organization. So basically, what we're saying here is that you should have a specific process that enables you to, one, identify your risk. This risk can be a deviation to your global overarching policy standards and functional rules. It can also be a risk in terms of your penetration testing reports. It can also be a risk coming from your internal or external audit. It might also come from identification of risk, might also come from your vulnerability, regular vulnerability assessment, for example. So having all these risks, you will now be able to then have also set up some sort of like assessment process where you'll be able to validate this according to your organizational risk. And then having part of these risk-based supporting your business process is also to have the necessary response plan in place, whether you are accepting this risk, whether you are mitigating it, or whether you're somewhat transferring the risk in terms of cyber insurance, for example. One way also that we also need to look at as part of your overall risk management process is to have a robust monitoring and reporting in place. So we've identified a potential risk, then we probably mitigate this by understanding what are the mitigating controls that will lessen that risk, and then set up a necessary response from the business, whether the business is ready to accept that risk, or we are then going back to the technical teams to push for the remediation to be able for us to move forward. Then all of this process should also then be monitored and reported accordingly. So we have the risk-based business plan approach. And then the next part of that operating model that we are envisioning at is to have a critical security function. So understanding the critical security function establishes clear ownership and accountability to be able for you to understand and to be able for you to be in the position to decide how the organization will run its business. Now we can use them to drive performance metrics. We can use them to continuously improve and innovate as we move forward. So these core functions are where the rubber meets the road, so-called, right? So when properly established, the security function will have the power to, one, provide a clear vision of your desired security capabilities, corresponding to what skills we need in terms of people, what processes that needs to be established, and then what are the technologies or tools or toys that we need to empower both the people and the processes that we have established. And then eventually, it'll also drive simplification, standardization, and for us to have a standard, secure operational processes. Okay, so understanding the different function to support your mission is essential. One also well is number 4 is to customize security metrics. All right, so having, as we always say, right? So what gets measured gets improved. Security metrics are critical to understanding the health of each of our functions, right? And also critical to provide a clear picture of the security of the organization. A comprehensive security metric program serves to unite the operating model that we're thinking with clear defined goals and measurement to provide a line of sight to performance and an enterprise security reduction eventually. So the key to evaluating the performance is, of course, measuring something impactful and then continually challenging and improving upon it. All right. So an example of that metrics that maybe I can share this afternoon is for you to have an holistic view of your organization, maybe starting from your gap in compliance with your overarching security posture. So you should go and sit down. What exactly are the mandated requirements as per my global, local, or regulatory compliance, and where am I sitting at against it? And for me to then understand how many risks are currently in my table, and how many of this risk is being managed in terms of how many of them are being monitored and reported on a regular basis, and how many of these are being remediated, and how many of this and what are these risks that has been at this point accepted by the business. So we should have like some sort of like a threshold and a complete picture on this different domains. And in terms of our internal and external vulnerability, we should have like a certain threshold as well to say that we are doing good. Well, we should have a threshold that says that we can do better, or we should have a threshold that says, hey, your organization, your function is somewhat poor on this area, and then provide an action, a clear actionable path on where you want to go moving forward. Some of the metrics that you might also measure here is in terms of security incident handling, right? One metric is how fast can you resolve a certain security incident. Maybe how fast can you respond to a particular issue? How fast can you like detect a certain alerts or potential incident? And then ultimately, and least but not the last, is also for you to have some sort of like a metrics to measure your users' resiliency in terms of phishing attacks, for example, social engineering. So having that threshold and having an agreed threshold with the business and then a global security function will eventually help you to see where you are at now and where you want to moving forward with clear, actionable steps, right? So security metrics are critical to understanding the health and the core function and provide a transparent picture of your company. Okay. Next, the last one with this operating model that we're picturing is to have an oversight and management controls. Of course, for us to be able for us to measure the metrics that we've set, for us to look into how we can then self-assess ourselves compared to a specific benchmark or framework that we have established from point number one. For us to have some sort of like a management regular reporting to the senior management on where we are at now, where we want to go in the next month or quarter, and what is our target objective at the end of the year. And also good for us in terms of oversight and management control is to have established and clear plan in terms of how we are remediating the risks that we have in place, the risks we have in our plate at this point. And ultimately, number 5 on this last point in oversight and management control is for you to have a peer group that either help you assess from a third-party point of view or help you measure your performance in terms of a predefined benchmark as previously agreed upon. Okay, now just for the interest of time, I'm looking into like putting this up all together now. So okay, one point that we also need to understand here is there's no two operating models are the same. My suggested operating model works probably in my company and might be a little bit different on your company or on your industry, but ultimately the idea is the same: for us to have a clear specific control, for you to have a specific threshold and metrics, for you to have a specific standard way of identification and reporting and a remediation of risks, and ultimately for you to have some sort of like a third party point of view assessment on top of your self assessment. Okay. And having all this, ultimately, it'll help you provide an oversight, that give you a clear picture again of where you are at now and where you want to be in the future. Okay, and my last slide here is actually a combination of the resources on the tools that probably might help you, some framework as well that you might also want to adapt, be it your or financial industry, be it on your healthcare or manufacturing or any other industry in that regard. One thing that I would like to highlight here really is for you to have a specific, governance, risk, and compliance tool that you might want to set up in your company for you to be able to document the policies that you have, for you to be able to document and monitor the risks that you have currently in your organization. So there are a lot of things that I would like to share this afternoon, but I think we can take this offline, and then if you want to reach out with me and continue the discussion, this is where you can reach me out. So that's all for this afternoon, and thank you everyone for your attention and then for joining me in this session. So I'll catch you up again later in our panel discussion.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here among all the other esteemed speakers. And thank you for that introduction. I feel like an old man when I hear that. It seems to be I've been around a few times. So yeah. So I'm going to talk about all the things that Anthony and Keith have been talking up to now. And that's about the context of the whole thing. And it's all about the people, the human element in this whole approach, and how to make things much more easier, how to prioritize, how to align and collaborate more effectively. And you'll hear me saying how to. And that is what it's all about. For years, and I suppose like 35 years now, we've been into the business of teaching people the how to. So I'll work through mine, and I'll refer back to my previous speakers on occasions for this. So let's get right into it. So today in cybersecurity or in risk practices, when I meet with a team, whether it's the risk team, whether it's the executive team or any management team, these four things are normally the things that's been brought up. Like the risk team seen as being accountable for risk and cybersecurity. So they are the guys that must look after it. We just the minions here. We just work. And these guys must watch our back. And that is, of course, abdication in management terms. And there's no accountability, which is difficult then for any risk manager, CRO, or whatever to manage. Another challenge we have is that risk is seen as a necessary evil until you need them to deal with that risk situation. Yeah, look, I know they have to be there. Let's give them $100,000. Let them just do something so we get them off our back so we can continue with our business. Not realizing that these people actually needs to be the glue, that everything fits together. And the components that glue is not just them, it's everyone in the organization must be glued together in a risk mitigation strategy that will help them to deal with any kind of vulnerability. And of course, as you know, vulnerabilities are myopic. They go from one place to another place to another place all the time, and they are evolving as they go along. The third one, staff feel they are being told what to do without understanding why. That is very common. Oh, these are the risk people again. Okay, they just want us to do this. They don't really know what we are doing every day. We are too busy to do this kind of thing. So really, they must just do the thing. we don't want to know what's going on here. And you can see where it's all going to: lack of commitment, lack of buy-in. And with the result is you have to spend so much more to convince people, to motivate people, to influence people to actually do what you want them to do. The last one, staff and management not aware of the possible impact and consequence of a risk problem. A simple example, you've been told, firstly, and you don't understand why, that when you get to the end of your production day, that you have to close all your browsers, you have to close your computer and switch it off. And you think, oh, who would be interested in my computer? I'm not going to worry about it, because tomorrow morning it's going to take me a long time to reboot everything, get to all the websites again. I'm not going to do that. Not realizing that that could be the gateway into the total enterprise system. And people at that level don't know that. They don't understand that that is a kind of consequence that can happen to them and to the rest of the company at that time. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with this thinking, yeah, risk, okay, risk again. We've been dealing with that risk situation for years. I'm not going to worry about that now. So you don't really have that buy-in. All right. So if I then go to, no, why doesn't that want to do that? So now my thing doesn't want to, okay. All right. So the basic process I want to really present to you, basically a 4-step process, which is a top-down approach and a bottom-up groundswell. And this is to do with the alignment that Anthony was talking about, collaboration was talking about, the context that Keith was talking about. And I just want to go through this fairly quickly. The executive team to generate and crystallize possible risk scenarios. That's what Keith talked about. And that's to look at all the disruptors, the behaviors, and all of those factors, as I would call it, all of those factors, they, many of them, all right, a lot of them. And where do we start? And that's what Anthony talked about, the prioritization. Where do we start? Because that's so much, it is so overwhelming that people rather not getting into it than actually doing something here. So we then finalize those risk scenarios to identify the enterprise processes to be analyzed, because each risk scenario impacting a specific process, whether that is a vendor feedback process, whether that is a authentication process. We have various processes in our company, and each one of those processes is a potential vulnerability, allowing a breach and, of course, creating havoc. So we want to make sure that we identify the correct processes. And this is where the 2080 principle really becomes very important, because through the risk scenarios situation, we will identify which ones are the dangerous ones, which ones are the ones that we really have to address to give us an 80% resiliency effort. So we would use a risk facilitator and the process staff, that is the process owner and the staff involved in the process, because that's using the correct stakeholders, because you have to get the right people to answer the right questions to get to the right answers. So you want to talk to the right people, the right process staff there to produce a heat map for their process. And I will show you and I'll demonstrate that heat map. It looks very similar to the map that Anthony showed earlier on my previous discussion. The team then identify the dangerous possible breaches and build a resiliency strategies after getting permission from management. So top down, giving the direction of how we're going to go, and bottom up, the groundswell of the actual data, the actual information that is much more believable at that level. So what are the benefits of such an approach? Executives are ready to set the direction because they believe now what they are paying for is actually going to provide results. It's going to give them return on investment, which in the end of the day, the person at the top level, that's what they measure against. Return on investment, profitability, P&L, that's it. It's highly focused approach, addressing 20% normally causing 80% of your vulnerabilities. And the lower level staff are doing their own analysis, and that's the plural form, and we discover the vulnerabilities that would affect them adversely, which will personally affect them. There's nothing stronger, guys, if you're looking at stuff and that's what's in it for me. If I do something and it's going to improve my situation, okay, I'm in. But if it's not going to improve my situation, why worry? All right. Then number 4, their staff will own the vulnerabilities and the resiliency build they generated to avoid the risk from occurring. Major buy-in and commitment and alignment have been achieved when that is done. So it's very simple. We do the things we need to do, but the human element is going to be the glue in the end that is going to either make it happen or not. And we have to be very careful that we don't lose these people along the way. Okay, so what are the risk facilitator process staff produced heat map that we're talking about here? It's based on 7 threat variables. First one, of course, is the process that I mentioned, right? The process is from beginning to end that a process team or a process owner with his or her team will look at. Then you identify the threat actors. These would be the triggers for a breach, potential triggers for a breach. That could change from process to process, but what we normally suggest is a set of about 5 or 6, and you can choose from those 5 or 6, 3 or 4 actors that you feel are most probable in your situation. Then we identify the probability of each threat actor causing a potential breach, the level of detectability, and that's also something that Anthony talked about. The detectability, we don't always be able to detect something because, as you know, we have public recorded situations where people only discovered a threat or a malware or something a year after it's been initiated, or even 2 years after it's been initiated. And detectability was very difficult in that case. So level of potential disruption, if that breach does take place, what is the level of disruption that we're going to have to our operations? Of course, manageability. If that is a level of disruption, would we be able to manage it, guys? Because you know what? We face situations where we are in control of the situation 100%. Fantastic. You also face situations where you're not in control of it 100%. You have to rely on third parties, maybe a vendor, maybe a specific customer. And then it makes it a bit more difficult to manage. And then altogether gives us a livability level. And that is where the rubber meets the road. The livability is the final indication whether we need to address this or not. Okay, and that's the company's ability to live with the breach, consequence, and fallout if it does happen. And of course, we want to try and prevent it from happening. Okay, just to give you some example, and guys, I don't expect you to read all of that. It's just to give you how we do this. We use a very simple score. Probability, of course, is the magnifier here. 0 for no chance, and as you can see, 4, it is factual, it's going to happen. That's the 2 scenarios, and then of course in between you have a low probability, medium probability, and a high probability. Manageability, yeah, if it happens, no pain whatsoever. It's painless. We can just do the following and it's all sorted out. Laborious means, yeah, we can handle it, but it takes a few resources to do it. Difficult means that it's really extensive and expensive, and it's going to be very difficult to get everybody to actually fall in line to get this fixed. Grueling means perplexed and complex. It is going to be highly, highly difficult to address. Level of disruption, trivial as a 1. No disruption. We just have to get the risk team to come and sort it out. Sorry for that. Serious, yes, it is. There's definitely some possibility that it can be serious, dangerous, and of course disastrous. Hopefully you don't get disastrous, but that will blow you out of the water. All of this culminates into a livability scale. Green is for livable. Yes, if it does happen, guys, we can do it. Demanding means, yeah, we can handle it, but it's going to be a bit of resources. Challenging means that could be quite a few things to do. And punishing and penalizing means we really be blown off the water in this one. Just an example of the scale we're going to use. So let's now look at the model, that the heat map we're going to use. So let's say that we have identified 2 processes, authentication and external websites. There on my right-hand side, you will see my probability, detectability, level of disruption, manageability, and livability that I mentioned earlier on. And here I just mentioned 2 threat actors, high incident rate being experienced and level of public access. So we rate the probability of high incident rate being experienced in the area of authentication. We said, no, probability is just a 1, very low. And then in the case of detectability, yeah, fairly detectable, but it could be a problem. And then the disruption, it will disrupt us because that's out of 4. 3 out of 4 will disrupt us. And of course, manageability, very difficult to manage, to manage it. And then that brings us to a 9, and that's a green score. Anything above 25 is going to be the disastrous approach. And if you look at the threat actor number 2, a 3 probability, the rest looks the same, but look what probability does to the score. And the score is now 27. Now you have a red situation, code red, okay? So that is just a quick explanation. Obviously, we go into much more detail with the real situation. Now, what does it look like? So here you see a heat map. If you look at the top, I just used a situation that is fictional. A company process. Here I just took a company email process. Team 1 is a process team. Online business process, team 2. Authentication process, team 1. Process of assessing SharePoint, accessing SharePoint, team 3. Staff external browsing, team 3. Vendor assessing company OneDrive, team 3 as well. And here are my threat actors. This is what can change from process to process. History of accessibility issues. So we would ask the question, the history of us having accessibility issues, what's the probability that that will cause us a company email process breach? And we said there, where's my question? We said there's a 2. All right. And you go through the other one, which is of course livability and everything else, and the total score came to 18. And for the online process is that one there. So for that same process, process 1, the other one is a yellow score. For hardware stability is a red score, and the green score and the orange score. Now, what I want you to do is to look at all of this, and this is now what we would end up with from various teams putting a heat map together, and this is what now will be presented to management team. So they don't have to get into the detail. With one slide, or if it's maybe more, you have 2 slides, 3 slides, right? But with one slide, they can see immediately where all the reds are. And if you look at this here, you'll see that those 2 areas, authentication process team 1, is got reds all the way, except for this one here, there's no red there and no red there, which means that process is very unstable. And it's got a high probability of causing a vulnerability and a breach taking place. So that's a priority for us to investigate, this one here. And the same for staff external browsing, this one here. Interesting aspect here is the staff security awareness, obviously at the bottom here, right? And then you can also, now you have, depending how much resources you have, how much time you have, how much money you have in a company, you can go and put a little analysis together for each one of these red areas. Or you can determine you're going to work on this whole process here and that one there. So 2 out of the 6 that we have here. All right. So management then, executive management can then say, all right, we want you to do the following: A, Z, B, and D. And we'll pay for that. Now, just the alignment. This is a groundswell data from the bottom upwards, where the workers in their workplace are saying, this is what's happening. And they identify themselves. This is a dangerous situation for those one that's red. And management, they have no inkling what's happening on that level, especially if it's a board and they're not all working in the same company. So these guys now getting perfect data and information to let them make a decision where the focus is going to be. And they say, yes, let's go for a slice first. Let's go for authentication process and staff browsing process. And let's do those 2, which then put a team together, and they then have to build resiliency, come up with their own actions. The ownership is there, the commitment is there. Their own actions, how to make their life easier, and not for something to happen to them personally. So this is then what happens. So requirements to consider is the ability to engage the correct stakeholders when designing resiliency. So these guys, when they go out, we ask the question again, who are the people that's got skin in the game? Who are the stakeholders that's got a vested interest that will be directly impacted or affected by a breach in this situation, because that's your highest commitment level, that level. Then we use strong and comprehensive problem-solving processes, such as root cause analysis, to identify the root cause if something already happened so it doesn't reoccur again, or any likely causes of a potential breach. And we use the root cause analysis to look at potential causes, not only at existing causes, potential causes. Then solution finding, using staff to generate resilient strategies to fix vulnerabilities. And of course, this is an approach where they get together and they look at an internal solution first, without going for anything expensive externally, but internal solution first, what they can do. And normally, gentlemen and ladies, what I found with this situation is that it's simple little actions, like switching off your computer, for instance, all right? And then lastly, a thorough risk analysis to find the best mitigation actions, looking at all the risk factors and what we can do to mitigate that. So those are then the resiliency build that will be forthcoming from these people. So factors then represented into quick understanding is the heat map will give a visual impact of most important and dangerous vulnerabilities with associated consequences to be addressed. That's what the heat map will do. Investigation teams would also suggest possible, sorry, I got possible there twice, guys, strategies to employ to address a company-wide resiliency build. 100% alignment between executive team management and staff, and management is ensured of a high levels of all-around commitment and buy-in, which is what you want. So all these things we've been talking about, like the scenario situation, prioritization, alignment, collaboration, all of that is now really good because we now have people on our side, and we have a good way to now deal with data that's more accurate. All right, so that is my presentation, guys. Just to let you know then that it's you can make it a comprehensive approach. If you really feel that you are going to be prone to a lot of vulnerabilities, or you can make it just a slice approach with one area or one process that you feel is really got a high potential of creating all kinds of vulnerabilities.
Thank you for being at this event. I hope it's not too heavy so far for a Wednesday afternoon, but it's really great learning and great insights. And so let me go into the way it works is this. I'm going to ask a few questions and we have time. We'll welcome some questions from the audience. I'll ask one question and each of the four, this is not a contest, but the way I'll ask one question and each of the four panelists from their own industry background and expertise will respond, give their views on the answer to the same question, and we could have a bit of so it's like a four-man fireside chat, you know, and then of course you're feeling to chip in, you can agree to disagree, agree to agree, disagree to disagree, and all that kind of thing. At the same time, there had been some, before that, I'd like to make a disclaimer. There had been some earlier questions sent in by the audience already, but unfortunately, we won't be able to answer all of them today at the forum because, and if we do, we'll try and get the appropriate experts, our colleagues, to respond to you privately, partly because, number one, some are very vertical and may not be the scope of the forum today. For example, some people talk about AI, some people talk about Amazon, some people talk about cryptocurrency. So you know, if we go do that, then the forum will take another half an hour or an hour or so, and so we'll try and respond to these things privately. But for now, for this afternoon, remember, if you have not already forgotten, the theme this afternoon is basically cybersecurity and enterprise risk management. So my first question is a bit long, so I'll try and make it a bit shorter, but generally I need to set the background for the question. Enterprise risk management, like what you've heard from the experts so far, have been around for many years, 20, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years, 80 years, but, well, I don't know about 80 years, but, and cybersecurity has been around too for 20 or more years, just as back then they didn't call it cybersecurity. But the two of them have not been in the same room, and definitely not the boardroom. Enterprise risk management, cybersecurity. So, but only a few years ago, the two are starting to get together. Enterprise risk management is starting to get involvement with cybersecurity and vice versa. So it's still painfully slow. Now, good gentlemen, sirs, in your respective work and clientele, Do you see currently an increase in interest in the executive management consideration of cybersecurity in enterprise risk? Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll start.
Okay, you got my question.
Anthony, yes, I've seen that. I think that we can thank cybersecurity breaches and it going very public and being publicly recorded and spread via the main news media, where senior teams and non-IT teams becoming aware of, wait a minute, this risk is really real and it can really impact us. So vulnerabilities found in IT processes these days are transponding across production, across admin, across all kinds of disciplines. Therefore, they are forced to become more aware of it because IT is becoming more and more a part of their day job. Ask me, I'm the oldie here. I know exactly.
Thank you, Matt. Okay,
so,
we'll come on to Ken. Ken, thank you very much, Matt. We'll come on to Ken. Ken,
Yes,
your
yes.
work. So you see an increase in interest in the boardroom for cybersecurity risk?
Definitely so. I think it is on the similar notes as what Matt mentioned. I mean, BH Global is a publicly listed company. And when I joined them, that was about 7 years ago. And what I can see is that, of course, as a listed co, they will have their BCM framework and even the ERM framework. Actually, until now, I still wonder why these two are not together. They are isolated, but it's been a very big topic in the industry. I can see that last time it was very much to do so in the context of compliances, because as a listed co, you need to do that. And every year we have to do the relevant reviews on all these things. As I come on board and over the last few years, so many real factual breaches happen. I think the most non-tech business people would get concerned as well, right? And in a boardroom, then there will be natural discussion of all these risks. And we do start to factor in all these cyber items within the BIA of BCM, and also the ERM table. So I think to answer your question, yes. And because of all this, and due to this special background of running this IT and then Discover 2, and then we spin off as a subsidiary company, as a cybersecurity consulting outfit. Then the other aspect of it, as to the other 50% of the question, is going to the markets externally. Yes, we also feel so. And even so, down to the level of smaller companies that we can feel. I still remember 5 years ago when I visit SME, right, small, medium-sized company, talk to the well-accomplished tauke, right? I always cite this example. They will look at me and look at me. I'm not young, but to them, I'm young. You look at me, this young man trying to teach me something, like that. And then they will say that, well, I'm not a bank. Why should I be concerned about this? And then when I mention about certain thing that you need to put in place, very basic thing, like even firewall, they will say, oh, wow, so expensive, a few $1,000s. And they can, when I leave the office, they left the office in their Lamborghini, that sort of thing. So that is very hard to educate that time. But over the time, I can feel that generally, I think the sample should be quite general. Awareness is much and much higher due to all these breaches.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Very insightful, yes. Okay, Keith will come to you in a minute. I'll go to Anthony first. In your work, do you see, again, do you see an interest, an increased interest in the boardroom for cybersecurity risk?
Yeah, well, being in financial industry, I think this is given by default. Not just because MAS is behind us, but generally speaking, I second what Dr. Matt mentioned about exposure now, that what will happen in terms of how other company was hacked, and the idea of the board discussion is how can then we prevent same thing happening to us. This kind of perspective is now good thing maturely happening in the board itself. But one thing I would like to point out, though, in the executive management perspective, they are still generally still coming from the compliance point of view, right? So in terms of what does MAS says about what we need to do as a company. So the regulatory requirement still plays a big factor. That's why in my presentation a while ago, it is really important for us to embed the security framework so that when we talk to the executive management, it's there by default, through the heat map and how we operationalize it. So I think in FI generally, Anthony, it is there by default. It's given.
Thank you, Anthony. All right, now we'll go back to the other side of the world. Dr. Keith Smith, do you see the same thing?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I think it's a very good question, actually. If you go back a couple of decades to start with, taking products and services to markets wasn't so dependent on IT systems. They come in initially as peripheral equipment, but in much as those curves I've shown now, complexity's risen, clock speed's risen, and that's forced IT into the central platform of how organizations operate. And as Matt says, they've been forced. You look at breaches, so people are starting to lose money. That graph I showed on the right-hand side of my first slide, the actual cost of IT breaches is rising. It's rising rapidly. People are losing their business. A ransomware can take you offline and stop you performing. These things are forcing themselves onto the board agenda. And the natural response to that is saying, well, what's our response to these threats? We've got to start managing these risks. And that's what brings us into that combat situation. So I endorse what the others said and what Matt was saying about getting down to the root cause. Not getting down to the symptoms, getting down to the root cause. What's actually causing this problem? And I think that's one of the issues that organisations certainly need to tackle. And the last one now, I think Anthony's there from Allianz. The other thing that makes this very much a boardroom issue is insurance is expensive. Okay, so if you're not following good processes and practices in your information security, then you'll see it in your premium. And a lot of people now expect you to have cyber essentials in place before they'll even offer you insurance. Okay, so yeah, very good.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Right. So this is very encouraging. From different perspectives and from around the world, there's a general consensus on, yes, there's a greater interest in cybersecurity risk, in enterprise risk management in a boardroom, which brings me to the second question. Now, the funny thing is, although the answer is yes, cybersecurity is still taking a back seat in the organization. It's treated as a cost, a pain, a bother, too technical to understand, But now with it becoming a legitimate consideration in enterprise risk management, do you think executive management, the boardroom, will start to see cybersecurity as a key part of business operations, an enabler, a strategic piece rather than a showstopper? Come back to you, Matt. Now that we've agreed that there's an interest in the boardroom for cybersecurity, is it greeted with strategically or disdain and reluctance or compliance? I don't want to go to jail kind of attitude.
Yeah, there is definitely an improvement, although it's been happening very reluctantly. You find that the mistake that a lot of them make is they take the CIO or a PMO, project management office chief person, and make them the CRO, the chief risk officer. And then that's the mistake they make, a lot of them. And then secondly, a lot of them still see it, and I would say the majority still see it as a necessary evil. They will ask for your input and for your presence at the board if they think there is a potential problem regarding risks. You are not a regular member. I only know of a handful of organizations that has done this, where the CRO is actually part of the board, an executive committee, but it could be improved.
No, not only when there's trouble, right? We'll go ask the real CRO, the real CIO. Ken, what do you think? Do you think executive management is now welcoming cybersecurity risk as a partner and enabler rather than still, you know, a troublemaker? You're muted. Ken, you're muted.
Yes. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I see that it's difficult to generalize. It depends on each company and also depending on each sector. For example, one good example is like CII, right? I mean, in Singapore, CII, CISO is not easy. You know, the legislation coming in is very hard. We know up to something like negligence and things with 2 years jail term. That is very hard. And then if you look at SME, the attitude and the awareness looking at this as a cost or inevitable cost or strategic value in this thing is also very among companies. I think BH Global is a very special example. I mean, you turn it into a business, which then it is not a good example, but I can see that they turn it into a new revenue stream for the group, which also show that there is a potential to see it beyond just also strategic business value, but a potential for business transformation. So it varies in my response to this question. Yeah.
Okay. What about Anthony?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, generally speaking, most of the executive management still speak through callers, right? So as long as they see kind of lighter color in there, there is a very hard time for you to really even, you know, propose some kind of initiative. So if they see red, this is the opportunity for you. Then you know, that's why I mentioned a while ago in terms of the operating model, the moment that we can properly talk on their language, I think that's the best way for us to basically present the ideas in terms of awareness in terms of cybersecurity. But yeah, it's still generally they see cybersecurity as a blocker, right? So the question then is, what are we doing about it? That's why this is where the constant communication.
That's my next question. You're ahead of me. Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Anthony. Okay, so we'll come to Dr. Smith. Okay, so the same thing. You know, how now that although there's an increase in interest in the boardroom, but how are they taking it?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, it does come back to this idea that risk is seen as a threat, and psychologically, as human beings, we're not conditioned to respond to threats. We assume that threats and problems are going to occur to other people. That's why I really want to see the people see this as opportunity, and why I stress the importance of trying to bring it together as a scenario, because the scenario is a story of the organization. If you can get the story of the organization on the table, then the executives around that table will start to see the opportunity and where they can take the business. And that's really the benefit of doing it. And I want to stress that's competitive advantage. That's true competitive advantage. And it's hard to replicate. If you can get that happening in your boardroom, it's hard for others to replicate it. And that's gold. That truly is gold. But you've got to go for the opportunity and stop just seeing the threats. The threats you solve as you go through. They're operational problems. Use techniques that Matt's talked about. You solve the problems, but what you focus on in the boardroom is the strategic opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, which brings me to the next question that you and Anthony Derry have kind of alluded to. So my last question is this. So the boards are interested in cybersecurity, and but you know, not much because of compliance or fear of bad public relations. They're concerned about the theft of monies and intellectual property. Now, so how do risk management practitioners like you and us, security professionals, how do we speak cybersecurity to the board? Like you said, turn in the opportunity, get the acceptance of the C-levels without the technical jargon. How do we gain their support? You know, how do we don't want the guy who doesn't want to buy a firewall but buys a Lamborghini. So how do we gain the support of the C-level executives from us cyber risk management professionals? I'll come back to Matt, Dr. Matt first. You're muted. Dr. Matt, you're muted.
Yeah, no, I'm struggling to get my unmute because it's so small I can't see it.
Right.
Yeah. Look, here I have a lot of views, and I'll keep it short. I think this is what my whole presentation was about, and that is that, there's a disconnect and misalignment between the higher levels and the lower levels in the organization. And then you have the risk officer or the CRO on the side trying to bridge this gap. And that's a major task for that person to do. Therefore, I would suggest for the CRO to find something that is really going to be, that he or she knows is going to be meaningful, and then engage with the executive regarding very specific metrics, something that Anthony David mentioned. And those metrics must be very simple, very basic, and understandable in their language, because they are not, most of them are not technical, and they don't always understand what's happening at the ground level. Things such as number of laptops infections, they understand that language as a metric, for instance. So I would say find metrics that senior management can say, okay, we understand these, and then populate that with statistics by means of pie charts or with graphs, so they can see either getting it worse or getting better or whatever. Make it visual.
Oh,
unfortunately, I think they're the dumbest of them all. You have to make things visible to them and visual to them at that level, and then provide feedback regarding that in terms of dollars, bottom line, money in the pocket, return on investment. That's the only language these guys understand.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, Ken, over to you. How do you get acceptance in the boardroom?
Yes, I think I resonate strongly with what Dr. Matt mentioned. The management would not want to see a big chart and table of risk analysis. Neither do they want to see even a simple summary table of BIA. That's more for the CISO or for the CIO to work on. At the end of the day, it's still business strategy, business dollar and cents. So what I would say is that bringing forth to them what happened if the business stopped for a day, right? So you can work out a cost. Then I think the impact is very close to their heart. The other way to say so is like in maritime, International Maritime Organization has stipulated that ships has to comply with risk management into their ISM code by 1st Jan, not next year, this year, which is way past. And I know there are a lot of ships are still not complying. Then there is a potential that the ship is barred from sailing. I mean, depending on the ports, for example. So this kind of impact would create something very strong in the management heart. If they can't ship the sail, there's no way you can run your business at all, So it's a direct implication. So I think to communicate with them, I'm not coming from a fear-monger perspective, but I think this would be some languages that is very close to the management heart. Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, again, consider dollar pocket. Okay, Anthony, there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I also second what Dr. Matt is saying. This is basically what our presentation this afternoon about, right? How can then we operationalize this idea of giving awareness to the senior executive, right? So if I'll summarize my presentation, 3 things. One is for you to have an agreed control framework. Then you have a tailored security metrics. And at the same time is for you to have a proper reporting process. And then this goes on and this goes on. I think that's a summary.
Thank you, Anthony. All right, Dr. K. Smith, how do you not get kicked out of the boardroom?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I endorse everything that's been said so far. What we're talking about is good plain speaking. Anthony earlier on said, use the colours. That works well. So does Matt. You see what he says. So use colours. Put information simply. Keep the complexity out of the boardroom. I think the other thing is this idea of giving good metrics. Now, board members are familiar with key performance indicators. They've lived their lives by it. Key performance indicators look backwards. They look on how the firm has performed in the past. As a risk professional, I would you need key risk indicators looking forward, things that are indicating where your value is at risk and how that's changing. So if you can go with clarity in front of a board member and say, this is core to your business, this is a lot of value, and the risk is rising, you are likely to see some action because you're quantified for them in a very clear and concise way what's at risk, and you've got to deliver to them what they need to do about it. Because then they can pull the levers to open up the channels that they control, the finance and the resources. Thank you.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Okay, thank you, Dr. Keith Smith, Dr. Ken So, Dr. Matt Fourie, and Anthony Derritt. It's how succinct and clear, and I think the message is very clear and resonates with the rest of the event. Okay, I think this has been a wonderful session of learning, and and for today's world. And I'd like to hand you back to our very good MC and DJ, Mark Wong. Thank you, good sirs. Wonderful presentation, wonderful seminar conference, and thank you. Mark, over to you.